baseball fans. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Welcome into On Deck. I'm Tyler Redmond. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell notification so you can stay up to date with everything going on here at On Deck, and of course with the Atlanta Braves. A lot to talk about with the Braves and the trade deadline. Going to get to that in a second, but I wanted to highlight just for a minute the trades that happened outside of the Braves realm. And there were some big time deals all across Major League Baseball, some blockbuster deals, and in one of the busiest trade deadlines ever. So I want to highlight those for just a second and tell you maybe why the Braves didn't target those moves, why they didn't go after them harder, and why they ultimately did not happen for the Atlanta Braves. So again, busiest trade deadline ever, at least one of, in my opinion. Mainly due to the Cubs and their fire sale. You had three big names, really 4 or 5 big names leaving the Cubs, but 3 on deadline day. Those are Rizzo, Baez, and Bryant. Rizzo, of course, going to the Yankees, Baez going to the Mets, and Bryant going to the Giants. So for the Braves, there's really nowhere for these guys. We obviously don't need a first baseman. We don't need a shortstop. And we don't need a third baseman. We have Austin Riley, who's been one of our most consistent hitters, even though some of you may disagree. I could see possibly making him a left fielder, but I think we'd eventually have to give up way too much for that deal. So they're blockbuster deals, but not for the Braves, right? So if I'm being honest with you, outside of Jock Peterson on the Cubs, there's only one other guy that I would have even shown major interest in, and that would have been Craig Kimbrell, who didn't leave the city, by the way, and I'm sure he had something to do with that, probably had a choice as to where he went. He chose to go to the south side of Chicago as opposed to across the country. So it would have been nice to get Craig Kimbrell. Make no mistake about it, the bullpen could have used him. And the Braves tried. They were among about 10 teams going for Craig Kimbrell. That news was dropped amongst the rumors that were out there about the trade deadlines. And most of the rumors that were out there eventually came true. Some that I thought, no way that's going to happen, did eventually go through. But the White Sox did ultimately win Craig Kimbrell from the Cubs. They traded their number 3 prospect. MLB.com has him ranked as number 2 prospects among second basemen. That would be Nick Madrigal. But would you have wanted to lose a major prospect like Pache or Waters or both, or Tucker Davidson or Kyle Muller? I wouldn't have wanted to lose any of those guys at the moment, not for a rental reliever. All respect to Craig Kimbrell on his way to the Hall of Fame, but not for a rental reliever right now. Maybe you re-sign him, maybe you don't. Don't want to give up a major prospect with a lot of years of control for that type of return. So maybe the right deal for the White Sox, not the right deal for the Atlanta Braves, in my opinion. It will be interesting to see what the Braves offered. Eventually that will come out at some point or another. That'll be interesting to see what we offered, and it'll show you kind of where the Braves' heads were at this deadline. But ultimately, I think it comes down to the fact they didn't want to give up too much and not have a major return. So I think the same goes for Jose Barrios. Would have been nice. But also starting pitching wasn't the target. And with that said, I would have loved to see the Scherzer Turner deal. I would love for that to be Atlanta. But the fact of the matter is we don't need a shortstop. We have a solid shortstop. Sure, he's at the tail end of his contract, but he's a hometown guy. You like your chances of re-signing him. And he's been hot lately, and he's shown, moments of success, and, he's better year by year in Dansby Swanson, and I don't think there's any reason to go after a better one. And I think, if we wanted a better shortstop, we likely would have went after Trevor Story, and he likely would have been dealt because the Rockies are going to see no return for his services. So that'll be an interesting dynamic to see in the offseason. But again, we have a solid shortstop. Again, starting pitching, not the biggest target, so that to me eliminates the Scherzer deal, and I'm obviously not going to overpay for something that we don't necessarily need and is not our biggest target. So what were our biggest targets? One of them was an outfield bat. So what about Joey Gallo, Starling Marte, right? Those were guys that were, we were talking about throughout the entire maybe month and a half leading up to the deadline. Those deals both went in on the 28th of July. And they kind of opened the floodgates to every other deal that happened on the deadline. They were among the first, but, at least among the first close to the deadline. Jock Peterson and the Braves was obviously pretty early. There were other deals like that early on, but this was some of the first major deals leading up to the actual deadline. But here's the deal. The Yankees gave up a ton to get Joey Gallo. They didn't give up a ton in terms of like players playing right now. They gave up 4 prospects. According to MLB.com, they gave up their number 39th prospect overall, their number 24th prospect overall, their number 11th prospect overall, and their number 13th prospect overall. You had a 5th round pick, a 2nd round pick, and a couple of shortstops that were moving high in the prospect rankings just out of the top 10. So I'm not saying that it's not going to be worth it. I'm not saying it's a bad deal. What I am saying is they're taking a very big chance for a 217 hitter currently this year. I just don't think it makes sense for the Braves. The Braves have plenty of prospects to trade. I just don't think this one, in this instance, makes any sense for the Braves. And to be honest with you, if I'm a betting man, I don't think it makes much sense for the Yankees. But the Yankees can get away with it because they're the Yankees. Starling Marte did intrigue me. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you he didn't. But I couldn't see the Marlins dealing him, at least not to Atlanta. I mean, obviously he was going to get dealt at some point. He wasn't going to re-sign, so he was going to get dealt. But I couldn't see him being traded to a National League East contender. I just couldn't see it happening. To be honest with you, I was shocked to see Adam Duvall dealt. I think, the difference there is one. Adam Duvall probably had a voice in that. And he was dealt a day, a couple hours before the deadline. Starling Marte was dealt 2 or 3 days before. Adam Duvall was dealt the day of. Obviously, that changes dynamic. You want a return for Adam Duvall. You get a return for him. And obviously, they got a return in Starling Marte. But I think ultimately it came down to the fact that Marte was dealt early, Duvall was dealt late, and the Braves capitalized and got Duvall. And to be honest with you, if I'm picking one out of the 3, Marte would have been nice. But between Gallo and Duvall, I'll take Duvall. A little bit better average. Can hit homers with the best of them. And frankly, he's killed the Braves this year, so it's nice to get him off the Marlins. And maybe we'll get some wins from him and not, the opposite. So both of those guys are going to be dealt. Both Marte and Duvall are going to be dealt because Duvall was only on a 1-year deal. Could go into free agency and sign elsewhere, probably would have. Marte needed to be dealt because he wasn't going to re-sign and they wanted to get a return for his services. So, of course, the Braves lost Alex Jackson, a catching prospect who you're probably familiar with. If you're not, you need to watch more of the Atlanta Braves. But he, to me, he never really had a place in the organization, at least not for future plans. We have so many catching prospects. We got a guy that, of course, won the Silver Slugger last year, is on his way back right now, Travis d'Arnaud, who could potentially re-sign next year, which I think a lot of us would like to see, at least for 1 year, maybe, bridge that gap between Shea Langoliers and maybe bring him in on a slower pace, although I do think Shea Langoliers will be here quicker than we do think because he's killing it right now in Double-A. So let's talk about all the trades that the Braves had over the past week or so. The first one happened early. It was with the Cubs. Jock Peterson came to Atlanta, and Atlanta gave up Bryce Ball, a first base prospect. Bryce Ball is a guy that, if you don't know who he is, I actually did a video on him. He hit a homer in spring training, I guess about 1.5 years ago now, right before the COVID season. And he's a guy that has light tower power, a big kid, can't play first base well, not too well anyway. His defense lacks, but his bat is on fire. He's a guy that I think can, come up and be successful in the major leagues at some point. I think he's a guy that I was actually looking forward to seeing in some capacity, especially considering that the DH is, being rumored to eventually make it into the National League. If that were to happen, he was the guy that intrigued me to fill that gap, especially with Freeman taking first base for the foreseeable future. The second one, Stephen Vogt. We got him for Mason Byrne, another first base prospect. And you're seeing a trend here. You're seeing first basemen leave the Braves in a rapid fashion. And I don't want to say that hints at anything with Freddie. I think Freddie's dealt with anyway. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think if you ever thought he was going anywhere, you're a tad bit insane. I think Freddie's going to be here to stay. And I think this trade deadline solidifies that. If we were going to get rid of Freddie, we would have done it at the deadline. And I think that would have been ludicrous if it happened. So with that said, you're seeing this trend of first baseman leaving. I think that's because you're going to see Freddie re-sign. And, a lot of people, we're not even going to get into the Freddie Freeman ordeal, but I think this is a statement by the front office. We're going to give up these first base prospects, and we'll gladly give it to you because we know we're keeping our first baseman next year. So that fixed the catching issue. Kevin Smith has obviously struggled. Contreras obviously struggled. And I think this brings in a veteran for the pitching staff to work with. I think it does a lot for the pitching staff. Notice, if you haven't noticed, starting pitching's been a lot better lately, and the bullpen seems to start coming around as of late. So I think that has a lot to do with who's behind the plate. Eddie Rosario was the third trade. That happened on trade deadline day. Outfielder, kind of utility guy, maybe a bench guy. We traded him for Pablo Sandoval, and of course it was a really sad day to see Pablo Sandoval traded away from the Braves. Gonna miss the panda hugs, gonna miss all that good stuff, but we did get a good return for him. Rosario is a trustworthy bat. He's a trustworthy utility guy. He could start on certain days. We could see him platoon on certain days. It's sort of the mentality Alex Anthopoulos had with this whole deadline. We're not looking for anybody major, one guy to come in and perform. We're looking for bench bats. We're looking for people to improve the overall aspects of the team, and I think that is a perfect fit with Eddie Rosario. Number 4, the fourth trade. This is a big one, probably, arguably name value-wise, biggest name we got, Adam Duvall. We got him for Alex Jackson, like we talked about earlier. Adam Duvall is a guy that I did not want to lose. In fact, I was actually really curious as to what Alex Anthopoulos was going to say about it, because, I mean, in a lot of ways, this could be considered an admission of wrongdoing and not re-signing Adam Duvall, going after him at the deadline. But I don't think so. I think Alex Anthopoulos, he stated it the other day. I mean, budget cuts had to be made, and at the time, if you look at it, we had a full outfield. Adam Duvall deserves to play every day, didn't deserve to be a bench bat. But I still, at the time, wanted to keep him because, for the price, it was right, in my opinion. But I obviously don't have access to the finances. With that said, though, Adam Duvall for Alex Jackson, I think that's a great return. I think Miami got a good deal. They actually were playing Alex Jackson the other night against the Mets. So I think they got a good deal out of it. I think that could be a good catcher for their future. And I wish Alex Jackson the best. But at the end of the day, we got a great return. Hopefully it is something that is long-lasting. Maybe we can re-sign Duvall for next year. Hopefully we don't make the same mistake twice, and we get to keep him. I think he obviously loves being in Atlanta. He chartered a plane and got out there for that game that day. So he obviously likes being in Atlanta, and it's good to have him back. So big bat in the outfield. But we got another big bat in the outfield. This one's a sneaky pick, but it's a sneaky pick that I really like. Jorge Solaire. Outfielder, we got him for right-handed pitcher Casey Kalich. Jorge Solaire is a guy that on any year other than this year has been on fire. And as of late, he has been on fire. He admitted in a press conference the other day that he's had a slow start, like a lot of guys have had this year. I think a lot of our guys had that same slow start. But he's starting to come around. He's had a lot of base hits since he came over. He's had pretty much an immediate impact. And I think he can continue to have that impact if given that opportunity, and looks like that's going to happen. So I think ultimately between Rosario and Solaire, you're probably going to see Solaire start more games, Rosario on the bench more. Obviously Duvall is going to be a starter. I think Jock Peterson is going to be used in roles that fit him. He's adapted to the leadoff spot well. I think, playing a lot of small ball, finding the hole in the infield, bunting, all that good stuff. But I think ultimately Jock's going to be brought in when a righty starter's on the mound, and he'll pinch hit on other days. But before, we get to the next trade, we were actually live for this trade. I got on kind of early. I knew there was a chance that something else might go through, but I wanted to get on and talk to you guys. And Richard Rodriguez's deal actually happened right when I got on the air. We were probably on air for 5 minutes, and then Richard Rodriguez came through. So it was kind of hard for me to really analyze the situation. I didn't even know who he was traded for. Now we know now, and I can tell you what I think about it. We traded Bryce Wilson and right-handed pitcher Ricky DeVito for Richard Rodriguez. Look, I think this is a move that had to be made, especially after Kimbrel didn't go through. I think this is a move that I really wanted to be made. I actually did a video on it. I was hoping it would be him and Brian Reynolds at the time, but if you want to go check that out, you're more than welcome to. But Richard Rodriguez was a guy that I looked at as a guy that could stabilize the bullpen, and so far, through 2 appearances over this past weekend, that's been the case. He's had 2 scoreless innings, and I think that's going to be a trend that continues throughout the rest of this year. He's a guy that hopefully maybe we can get back next season, and I don't think we gave up too much. I really don't. I know we gave up 2 prospects, a big prospect with the name Bryce Wilson. I understand that. And look, I like Bryce Wilson. I thought at one point he was going to be a starter this year in spring training. If you look at the spring training numbers, it was looking like that was going to be the case. Just didn't turn out to be that. I think Bryce Wilson has every potential to be successful. He looked good the other night for the Pirates, and that's a great deal for them. I think the Pirates aren't here to compete. That's why they're getting rid of their bullpen. They don't need a bullpen at the moment, and bullpen arms are meant to go to contenders. And I think Richard Rodriguez just found himself a contender, whether it be this year or next. I think all of these moves do one thing, and that's bring us into a competitive balance with the Mets. All the teams in the National League East have been beat up, and the Braves are no stranger to that. And I think these deals have rebuilt the outfield, added to the bullpen, and gave us a couple extra bench bats. When Rosario's healthy, I think you got to determine who goes down. I'm leaning towards Almani on that, and I think you're going to see a whole new team. But there is a startling question concerning the outfield. One that we haven't talked a lot about on this channel, don't plan to, but the fact of the matter is we kind of have to right now. Marcell Ozuna could potentially come back this season, and this is a major update. This is something that I didn't think was going to happen. This is something that, if you're honest with yourself, you didn't think was going to happen because it looked bad for the past couple of months, but he's a lot closer now than he was 2 weeks ago. His charges have been changed from being very severe to misdemeanors, and that's obviously a big change. And there's been no word out of Major League Baseball. There's been no word out of the Braves as to whether or not that could happen. If it did happen, I think he's got to go through some kind of rehab for the hand. You got to see him make a couple of rehab appearances, and I don't know how long it's going to take for him to be ready. But he has not left the injured list. He's not made any kind of public appearance. He hasn't made any kind of statement outside of what he said about the body cam footage. But there's been nothing else. We have no update as to when. We don't know a timetable. We know nothing. And until then, we can't really make assumptions that he's going to be back. And I think the Braves know that. I think that's why they went and got as many outfielders as they did. But if he does come back, things get interesting. That's an instant power bat. That'd be like picking up a huge free agent at a certain point. And to be honest with you, getting Huascar Ynoa back. I know he had a rough start the other night, but you never know what he's practicing in Gwinnett. He had a rough start the other night. But again, you don't know if he's throwing all fastballs. You don't know what he's limited to. So I think if he can come back and be successful, look, he might do some rehab in the bullpen as opposed to doing it in Gwinnett. Maybe have a couple of 1-inning or 2-inning appearances out of the pen. I wouldn't mind that, especially with what our bullpen has been this year. I wouldn't mind testing that. Darno has made a couple appearances in Gwinnett so far. I believe he had a run scored and a walk the other night. He seems to, be getting back into the pace of things. Things can get interesting in the month of August, especially if all three of those guys come back. Those guys being Huascar Ynoa, Travis d'Arnaud, and of course Marcell Ozuna. Things would get very interesting. And look, I know we're down Ronald Acuna right now, and that's upsetting. But the team doesn't stop for one guy, and I don't think Acuna would tell you that either. So I think things are going to get interesting for the Braves. I think you have to credit Alex Anthopoulos as much grief as you guys like to give him. You got to credit him for having a solid trade deadline here. I think the moves he made were solid. I don't think he could have done any better for what we gave up. And frankly, I think it's going to lead us to some success, whether that be winning the division or making a run in the postseason. I really think things are about to get fun because the Braves, I don't know if you've looked at the schedule lately, but the Braves have a very friendly schedule coming up. A lot of games against teams like the Nationals, who are unrecognizable at the moment. The Marlins are coming up. The Orioles are coming up. The Mets, not so much. The Mets got to go face the National League West, which consists of the Giants, the Padres, and, of course, the Dodgers. So that'll be a fun ride for them, and it'll be a fun ride for us. So hopefully we'll get some wins and maybe get a streak going. I know it's been a win-loss scenario lately. I think that's about to change. I think they're about to find their groove. And that's all I got for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you do me a favor. Like this video. Send it to your friends. Make them watch it. Tell them to subscribe. And, of course, you hit the bell for notifications to stay updated. Let me know what you thought about the trade deadline in the comments down below. And we'll see you next time right here at On Deck.
Baseball fans, make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. As always, thank you for your support.